Listen, man, all I'm saying is if Nintendo and Intelligent Systems won't do it, then we'll do it ourselves, right? My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello, everyone. If you enjoy what I do, including covering indie Advance Wars style games, indie strategy games like, I don't know, Warside, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. First off, apologies if anything sounds different in this video. I will do what I can to make sure that the sound balancing is appropriate. However, I have just finished getting my new studio setup done in terms of at least like what my desk setup is, and things have been moved around a little bit, so I'm trying to make sure that everything is balanced and set up as it should be. But if things sound a little different, that's why. Don't worry, it's very standard. Nobody panic, everything is good. So what are we here to talk about today? Today we're here to talk about Warside. This is a game that I've been keeping my eye on for a fairly long time at this point. I'm not going to say a very long time, but definitely a fair amount of time. And it is very clearly an indie take on the Advance Wars series. Now, if you're not familiar, Advance Wars is actually the series that Intelligent Systems was doing before they really popped off with Fire Emblem. Now, I mean, they've been working on Fire Emblem, of course, but like it's what they were more well known for until Fire Emblem really took off. And unfortunately, the series has taken a major decline since Days of Ruin on the DS. Saw a little bit of a resurgence, I would say, with the Reboot Camp, Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp that finally dropped on Switch fairly recently, but did not really see the series revival that a lot of people, myself included, were hoping that we would see. Enter things like Warside. Warside comes to us courtesy of developer Lavabird and publisher First Break Labs, and is very much directly inspired by those old GBA and DS Advance Wars games. There is a new demo out right now that you can download in the Steam link that you'll find in the description. All of the footage that you're going to be seeing is coming from said demo, and I played through the whole thing on stream the other night, and I really enjoyed it. There are some things to critique, some things we're going to discuss here, but overall my impression of this demo was very solid. I'm definitely very excited to play more. That said, there have been some criticisms from my community that I think are worth addressing because I don't necessarily agree with them, even though I respect why they're being brought up. And overall, from a visual and mechanical standpoint, I think that Warside really has a lot that it's going to be able to offer us once it finally releases. So what is Warside and what is Advance Wars? Take the strategy and take out the RPG, and that's generally the gist of what it is that we're going to be talking about here. It is a game that is set in a rather modern military setting, I would say. You're building infantry, tanks, helicopters, artillery, and the like, but with the added benefit that you can have different commanding officers that have different special abilities you can use to modify what's going on the battlefield. The campaign, it looks like it's going to be progressing in a fairly linear fashion. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some kind of spin-off missions or choices that you can make throughout the campaign. But once you get onto a battle map, you'll have a fairly clear-cut overall quote-unquote board that you're going to be operating off of, using things like cities, bases, airports, etc., making use of terrain, both things that give you like extra defensive bonuses or ways that you can just create choke points or cut off enemy paths to success to be able to finally push forward and either eliminate all of the enemy combatants or capture the enemy HQ to win if there's not any other special objectives. In the handful of missions that I played during the demo, there was a variety of different terrain features to take advantage of, and in which you could utilize a lot of different types of vehicles. And for people who are familiar with Advance Wars, there is going to be quite a bit that is familiar here for you. Regular tanks, medium tanks, rockets, missiles, artillery, infantry, all of that is here, but there's also some interesting different options on hand as well. Infantry like snipers that function as an indirect infantry type unit that deal a lot of damage to enemy infantry, can overall be a stealthy ranged option that can deal decent damage to a lot of different targets, is make for a very interesting option in terms of army building. You have bike units with a suspiciously Spartan looking fellow at the helm that function as an actual like infantry anti-armor option, which is really cool. You have the Rhino, which definitely doesn't remind me of a certain armored transport from Warhammer at all, that actually doesn't have any weapons but can shove things around, allowing you to push enemies into terrain they can't navigate or otherwise manipulate the battlefield to kill enemy units or just move formations around, which is actually a really fun piece. And then options like the truck or the IFV that give you different ways to just transport infantry for a very low price or transport infantry and have some anti-enemy fire as well. Of course, those are just the ground-based troops. You also have things you can build from airports and from naval bases that give you some air superiority and naval firepower as well. And it makes for a very well-rounded experience that is very reminiscent of the Advance Wars series, while still having enough going on that is unique to make it feel like it's its own thing. Graphically, the game is very, very impressive, capturing the GBA style while having a more modern pixel animation style, if that makes sense, where you just have more frames and more details that you can work with, which makes the whole thing feel a little bit more up to date, which I very much appreciate. I feel like indies should have the opportunity to take something that exists and make it familiar while also building off of that familiarity and branching it into their own styles, that people recognize it, check it out, and then appreciate it for what it is. And I feel like Warside is doing that pretty well thus far. The music is also an absolute banger. I've been loving all of the OSTs thus far, and the dialogue and CO powers and everything have been minimal enough that it doesn't take away from the normal gameplay loop of building troops, building armies, pushing forward, maneuvering, using terrain to your advantage. The game loop that is what makes Advance Wars so compelling, while still being fun aspects of the game that complement that core gameplay loop. Now, while the game may be coming out in spring 2025, this demo does have some issues associated with it as well. Just a little bit of quality of life, brushing up of the details type stuff for the most part. For one thing, I don't like the fact that you're not able to move and then target what you want to attack. You have to select what it is that you're going to attack and like move to it to attack in one turn, one move, one action. When I'm very used to being able to say like, okay, my unit is going to go here and then I'm going to select what I'm going to attack from that position. I've had a number of times where I lost turns during my stream because I expected the game to function like that. There's also a couple of polished things, like there's no sound effects when enemy units are destroyed off the battle map that I feel like are really missing. And I would really appreciate an audio cue that can trigger or some sort of reminder to let you know when your CO power is active, because there was actually a number of times where my stream chat had to remind me, oh hey, your CO power is available, you can do this very influential thing to sway the battle in your favor. And I just didn't even realize that it was active because I didn't happen to look up in the top left corner and see that that bar was filled. That's partially a skill issue on my part, sure, but it's nice when a game has a little bit of a cue reminder to be like, hey, this is active now, just so you look and be like, okay, cool, while I'm figuring out where am I moving my tanks? Where am I moving my planes? How can I move up my infantry? What I'm going to build this turn? What money income am I going to have over the next 2-3 turns so I can plan out what actions I'm going to take? There are a number of odd things like that that I'd like to see brushed up on. As far as mechanical differences between regular Advance Wars and Warside, there's some stuff like not being able to move into cities to take advantage of them as cover and just have them available as a terrain feature to move into. That felt weird to me. There were so many times where I wanted to be able to move onto a base or a city, not even necessarily to get a defense boost, but just as part of my formation, only to realize that I couldn't do that and they were actually physically blocking progress for my units. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's something I feel like is worth bringing up for people who might be familiar with the Advance Wars series, who would expect that to function the way that I expected it to function and may be turned off if it then does not function that way. As far as changes from Advance Wars that I do really appreciate, infantry only have to tap a building or a city once to be able to start capturing it, and then its rate of being captured will increase over time until another unit interacts with it from the enemy team to disrupt that. And that is very interesting. It means that you don't have to worry about your infantry being locked down for potentially multiple turns just to try and capture a building, and they can move on to do other things because, you know, you like install some insurgents or have some other members of your force working on locking down and capturing the city. That is definitely interesting. I do like it as an idea, and I feel like it's going to keep battles fairly dynamic as people fight over cities that have different levels of control being exerted over them. Is it going to be a huge difference? No, I don't think so, but it is cool to see as a way to change up how the city capturing mechanic works. I do also really appreciate, I mentioned it a little bit previously, but I really like some of the different unit types that are available. The sniper, the medic, the rhino. There's some fun things going on here in terms of what army units you can build for different roles and different functionality during battles. Are they always going to be the most useful thing around? No, like sometimes you're just going to want your normal anti-air, your normal tank, etc. But having a few different roles that you can fill out to have different functionality can dramatically change the way that a battle is going to proceed. Like, just the existence of bikes with missiles that are anti-vehicle as a good mobile infantry anti-tank option is awesome. Like, gone are the days of the mech where you can only move 2 spaces. Give me bikes where I can actually stay mobile and deal damage to enemy tank columns, and I'm very, very happy with that. I also really appreciate the fact that you're able to have buildings spit out a unit where you want them to be. This is kind of something that goes hand in hand with the idea that you aren't able to have any units on buildings or cities. And that means that bases where you construct ground-based units from, for example, you're able to choose what tile around the base the unit that you just produced gets spat out on. And this means that if you have the funds to support it and the space around a tile that builds units, you can build multiple units from that tile in a turn. And that is very interesting. The idea that you could like squirrel away a bunch of money and say, okay, from this northeastern base that is in an advantageous position to push down into the enemy command center on following turns, I can save up a bunch of funds and build a small squad or a small army from that base that will then immediately begin applying pressure to the enemy on the next turn. It's a very interesting concept, and it means that you'll be able to have less bases and less airports on the battlefield, thus reducing the amount of income that the players are going to get, while also allowing them to pump out more units and having more action going on, which is something that I do very much appreciate. As far as online PvP is going to be concerned, it does exist in the demo. It's not something that I've been able to play with just yet, but I am very much looking forward to it going forward into the future. One of the things that I think definitely killed Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp, beyond the fact that it got delayed for like a year and a half due to real-world events it had no control over, was the fact that its online PvP was pretty limited. The player versus player functionality of Advance Wars games has always been one of the things that has given those games the most life. You know, back in the day, this was with the Game Boy Advance and using link cables to play against your friends, but it was a really fun way to spend some time with your buddies. Like, have some 1v1 or 2v2 or 4-man free-for-all games going on where people got to test their strategic skills and play around with different CO abilities and army functionality, figure out how to effectively use troops to take terrain. You could really test yourselves against each other. And the Advance Wars series has always really relied on that to keep their games relevant. But Reboot Camp didn't really have online matchmaking. You had to utilize friend codes to play against people, and it pretty much killed that scene immediately because people don't really have the patience for that when we have normal online matchmaking functionality in most games. So I'm hoping that that's a lesson that Warside has learned from, and they're able to really lean into the idea of matchmaking, of inviting very easily to games so people can continue to play against each other, because there is a lot of potential here. You don't need a huge array of COs and army functionality and units to make a lot of compelling gameplay when you have a lot of knobs to turn, like different types of terrain and different base layouts. You can do a ton with just that, and I think a game like this, where there's such a void in terms of semi-mainstream army building turn-based gameplay, they could really have something here. So I'm hoping that we see a scenario in the next couple of years where a lot of people are playing Warside online against each other to have just friendly but competitive bouts. All told, I'm very positive about this demo. I'm very positive about the future of Warside. There's things that they need to brush up on. There's a lot of polishing that does need to be done to make it a really strong overall experience and kind of cut down on some of the minor frustrating menuing and control issues that I personally took issues with. But I think if they can do that, they're going to draw in a lot of people who've been craving an Advance Wars-like experience in a world where Nintendo and Intelligent Systems just seem to refuse to do anything with it. I highly recommend checking this one out. Again, the Steam link for the demo is in the description, and any future news or updates about this project I absolutely intend to cover on the channel. So if you would like to see those updates, you should consider subscribing and making sure that you are paying attention to what's happening here. Also, of course, as I wrap up here, thank you to all of my channel supporters. Every week, I make sure that y'all can see all of the names scrolling by on the right side of the screen here. Without all the direct support from these fine folks, it would be much, much harder to keep the channel going. So if you are at all interested in checking out my YouTube memberships and my Patreon to see what you might be able to get for directly supporting the channel, then I would very much appreciate that as well. You can find links to both of those in the description as well. Finally, let me know what your thoughts of Warside are in the comments. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is it something that you plan to check out in the future? And would you be interested in potentially playing with me or other members of the community once the full game drops? I'd love to know about all of that so we can plan future events. I think it could potentially be a ton of fun. With all of that said, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other, everybody. Bye now.